I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today, I'm talking with Moses Singh, missionary to India, Bangladesh, and the U.S. Moses was converted in New York City and went on mission to India and Bangladesh before returning to the U.S. He and his wife have planted 2 churches in the U.S. while working full-time secular jobs. Listen to Moses' story of mission and how he plans to live to 120 by eating right and living right. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I hope you're having an amazing fall, and I want to say thank you so much. It's Thanksgiving weekend here in Tucson. I really appreciate your listening to the program. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen, to make comments. I want to give a special shout out to Rachel Erickson, who gave me the idea for this next guest on my program, and just thank you for listening. If you feel like you're benefiting from the program, I'd like to ask you to support it with a gift. Your support enables me to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches and inspire others to do the same through this podcast. All you need to do is go to the show notes and there's a link to support the program. Moses, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you having me on your program.
Absolutely. I have to give a shout out to Rachel Erickson. She emailed me and said, "Hey, Rob, you really need to talk to Moses Singh, and he's such an interesting person. I'd really like you to interview him." Rachel is one of my big supporters on the podcast. She and her husband, Bruce, we knew from the Flagstaff church planting back in 2021, and they're just great, great people. So Rachel, here's a little shout out to you. Thank you so much. I do listen and read to those emails, and if you are listening to this and you've got people around you that you go, "Hey, Rob really needs to interview this person," just shoot me an email, rob@robskinner.com, or text me and let me know, and I will do my best to get those people on the podcast. But Moses, can you tell me a little bit about how you became a Christian?
Sure. Well, it's a long journey, but I'll make it a short one. So what happened was that I was a student in India. I had finished my undergrad in engineering, and I wanted to be an Air Force officer in India. So I wanted to join Air Force Academy. However, I passed all the exam and everything, but later on in my medical examination, they rejected me for not just Air Force, but also Air Force and Navy, my second choice, or Army. So as a teenager, I was very discouraged. However, I ended up going to this prestigious college in India, IIT. It's like Harvard or MIT of India. So after I finished my engineering course, undergrad, I decided to stay in India and do something for the Lord, because I grew up in a very Christian household, and my parents taught me to read my Bible daily, to pray daily, and we would have a family devotion every night growing up. So it instilled in me to really be close to God. And then I decided to come to the US to do my further studies, my master's in New York area. So I was still looking for church there, and I couldn't find the church that I was part of in India. New York City, I felt like it was a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. My lifestyle was so different, the way I was raised up. And I just, within 2 weeks, I had full scholarship for my master's in engineering program. And I was trying to go to different churches. Nobody would speak with me in New York City. It was like a very impersonal city.
Mm.
And so I told my parents, Dad, Mom, I think I've had enough of America. I'm packing my bags. I'm coming back to India. So I was living in Manhattan and studying in Stevens Tech in Hoboken, New Jersey. So I would catch a PATH train from New York, Manhattan to Hoboken, New Jersey. So this was like, I've already made up my mind. I'm heading back to India, and I was having my quiet time in the morning reading. Maybe I was reading Isaiah, just like the Ethiopian eunuch, and I was actively seeking the church. So here in the morning, I'm leaving New York City, going to New Jersey in the reverse traffic. So entire train is empty. There's not a soul. And I'm just nicely 7 in the morning reading my Bible before I go and work as a research assistant to my professor. And I hear a gentle voice. And that voice was, "Is that the Bible you're reading?" Rob, I felt I died and went to heaven. And that brother came, started talking to me about God, about church. And I felt so full of spirit just speaking with him, at least somebody nicely talking to me and talking about God. That was Monday night. I didn't sleep on Monday night, didn't sleep on Tuesday night. Wednesday, I went for the Bible talk there in Lower Manhattan, where I live. And people were amazing, open about their life, talking freely with me and sharing their mistakes, falls, sin. And I've never seen all that growing up in a very strict Methodist upbringing back in India. So I just loved that fellowship on Wednesday. Then they invited me to come for the church on Sunday. So guess what? My sleep on Thursdays and Fridays and Saturday nights were gone too. And I go there on Sunday, Jacob Javits Center, beautiful, beautiful, big place, and everybody was singing, not just the choir members, and like good fellowship. I just loved it. I called my parents. I told them, Dad, Mom, change of plan. I think I might stay here a little bit longer
Wow.
and check this church out. Then started attending the Bible talks and church services. And as we started studying the Bible, probably a few weeks and months went by, then I realized that what I thought that I was God's gift on earth to people, well, I had also sins in my life, even though I grew up such a religious person.
Right.
And then when the brothers started studying Bible with me and helping me to change my life, that's when things started to get ugly. I'm like, whoa, what am I getting into?
Right.
But then I realized that these brothers, they didn't know me a few weeks, few months ago. They love me so much, and not just their doctrine, but by their lifestyle. It really helped me to see my life in its entirety.
Mm.
And then on December 28, 1990, cold day in New York City, a bunch of brothers got together and I got baptized. And this was such an important turning point in my life.
Wow.
So that's a little long-winded, I would say, but that's the conversion story that is just amazes me how God brought me to New York City so I could become a disciple of Jesus.
That's great. Okay, so December 28th, 1990?
Yeah, December 28, 1990.
Wow. Okay, Moses, may I ask, how old are you now?
So I'm 57 years old.
You're 57, and how old were you at the time when you got baptized?
23.
23. Oh my gosh. So you're a grad student doing graduate research. Okay, so at that time, Steve Johnson was leading the church in
he was leading the
New York
church
City. Okay, man, the church was big. It's like massive.
Huge.
Oh boy,
Yes.
Yeah, multiple thousands of people. Okay,
Yeah.
and then tell me a little bit. I'm guessing. I'm assuming you're married. How'd you meet your wife? Tell me a little bit about your courtship.
Well, it was short and sweet. And what happened after 5 years down the road, I think our church leaders, they said, well, people who've come from different countries, they may want to go back to their own countries. God has given them so much in America. So here, First of all, I didn't want to come to America. Then when I started liking America, then God tells me to leave everything behind
Mm.
and go back. And I'm like, you know what? I worked so hard to climb the corporate ladder and I'm doing so well and successful. Why God is asking me to do that? Well, it so happened that I met John Louis from Singapore Church. He was there at that time. He was coming to the US to talk to people from South Asian descent to encourage them to come back to India or South Asia, different parts of Asia. So I spent time with him, and he talked about what's going on in India. There's so much of need for people who are educated from good background that they can go and help in India and serve there. And in my mind, you know what? I wanted to go back to India after getting all my degrees, my PhDs, my law, and all those stuff, and then go back to India as a successful businessman, not like a poor intern who doesn't know
Right.
how to survive on a low, meager salary. But he kind of, when he talked about things that need there in India, it just helped me to see that what am I doing? I felt like I was like my namesake in Bible, Moses,
Mm.
got good education, good upbringing,
Right.
and then I'm not going to give up my life of Egypt.
Right.
So I said, well, I will think about it.
Right.
So I started praying, but still kind of wrestling with scriptures and in prayers. And then a few weeks later, Mark Templer, who was leading India at that time, he happened to come over and he invited some people, about 30 of us in Washington, D.C. And we were all there together from different backgrounds. Some people were born in America, some people like transplants like me who were born in India, came for further studies. And we were all people there, about 30 of us. And my future wife, Mamta, was also there.
Wow. Okay.
And it's an interesting story. I was very cautious. If I'm the only one going back to India or other people are, and I didn't know any one of them, they came from actually US and Canada in different, so we all got together there. So we were about, so 30 of us. A meeting we had one weekend in Washington, D.C., where Doug Arthur, Jim Blau, and a lot of people who had been in South Asia had come there to encourage us. So on Saturday morning, I was supposed to go early in the morning for a prayer walk with Mark Templer. So I all got ready, excited, nervous to go on for a prayer walk. And then I knocked at Mark Templer's door. He opened up. His wife Nadine was there. At the same time, Mamta, my future wife, walked in at the same time to have a prayer breakfast with Nadine. Unbeknownst to Mamta and I, Mark and Nadine looked at me and Mamta, made an eye contact with each other, and fixed up a marriage like Isaac and Rebecca. They came with that idea that they are going to get not only recruit people from India, just like the arranged marriages in India, they're going to arrange the marriage for them. And we had no idea, no clue. They didn't tell us anything. Of course, this started dropping hints that Moses and Mamta, when you go to India, you'll be leading campus together and all. Well, a typical male like me, I was clueless, more so because I was nervous that I'm still not decided that I'll go back to India at this junction
Right.
of my life.
Right.
Mamta kind of figured it out. Well, as usual, my wife is smarter than I am, so she figured that out. So then when we went back to India for 1 month, they didn't tell us anything. And the reason is they wanted to see if you're going to stay in India or come back to the US.
Right.
Because the living conditions back then, even now, are so harsh. So they saw that we are motivated for 1 month and we didn't want to go back. We were, of course, a lot of challenges were there, but we were determined to stay in India. So there was another evangelist. He used to translate for Mark on Sundays when he would preach in English, and the other guy, his name is also Mark. He would translate in Hindi. Well, at that day he was getting married, so Mark asked me, Moses, would you like to translate? Well, in front of 1,000 people, I've never done that before. Plus, for 5 years, I wasn't speaking much of my mother tongue Hindi in America, and let alone that, and then speaking in front of 1,000 people. Well, he said, what I do, what I preach, you have the same zeal, same conviction, and preach then and there. I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. I've been there for 1 month. So as soon as were going on the stage to preach, the song was going on, the song before the sermon, and my wife Mamta was one of the song leaders. So Mark says, Moses, what do you think about this sister Mamta? I said, oh, she's great. She's given up her career. She didn't even grow up in India, and she was a scientist, grew up in England and in the US, and she's a great sister. He said, no, no, what I'm asking you, do you like her to get married to her? And this is literally 5 seconds before I'm going to go and preach in Hindi in front of 1,000 people. So I said, well, I can tell you now, I'm nervous. Give me some time. He said, okay, I'll give you 24 hours. So that was a relief. We preached and everything went well. And then later on, the same brother who was translating earlier for Mark Temperer, he had a reception. So we went in the evening, and then he asked us that, okay, did you decide? So they wanted to ask me first if I'm saying yes, then they would have asked Mamta. So I said yes, not in 24 hours, in probably 8 hours, because I felt like and I've seen Mamta for 1 month, I've seen her hard work, seen her dedication, seen her sacrifice, and I trusted the leadership that I found out that they've been praying for that months and months before we even knew that. So I thought that this is a sign from God, and lo and behold, never ever regretted that decision. Wow. Second decision after getting baptized and saying yes to a godly woman of God.
Wow. How long was it between that time, that day, and the day you got married?
So not a long time again. So this is 1 month when everything was thrown in. And of course, she also said yes. And then while we kind of sort of dated back in the day, it was very restrictive. We couldn't date much. So we couldn't really get much time there. There was a need for a church planting in Lahore, Pakistan. Well, there were 4 people who were trained, 2 from US, 1 from England, 1 from New Zealand, and also 1 from Colombo, Sri Lanka. Well, the sister from Sri Lanka could not get her visa. So last minute, while Mamta and I beginning to know each other in just few weeks or days after that groundbreaking decision, she was asked by Mark and Nadine, would you mind filling in her shoes to start the church with a big, humongous mission team of 4 people? Well, she said, well, we're just getting to know Mamta, Moses and I. What should we do? She said, that's fine. You can still get to know her. So we said, okay, that's fine. I mean, we are sold out to the Lord, and that's fine. And I have known Mamta only for 30, 40 days. So she goes to the mission team there, risking her life every single day, and I wouldn't know if she'll come home alive. While she was there, she was followed, she was attacked, and I mean, it was back there, the conditions for women in Pakistan were not that good. So then she stayed for like 4 or 5 months, baptized, they all baptized, mission field of team of 4 people, baptized like 30 people in just 4 or 5 months.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it was amazing what she was doing there. And then they came up with the idea that we'll let you go out on phone dates. But this is the trick. Neither you nor her can directly call from Delhi, where I was an intern, to her in Lahore, Pakistan, because India and Pakistan, since long time, not have been good neighbors.
Right.
So I would call the church leader in Sri Lanka and beg him from his little meager church budget to connect me from Sri Lanka to my future wife in Pakistan, and we would have 15 minutes date once a month for 5 months.
Oh my gosh. How did he do that? How did you do that technically?
So technically, I would call Sri Lanka, and brother will connect me from Sri Lanka to Lahore, Pakistan. It's like from up north, I'm calling down south, and down south, another country, so that our phones will not be traced.
It must have been a terrible connection. I can only imagine.
Fortunately, maybe it was God who parted the connection. We could speak for 15 minutes clearly.
Wow. Okay. That's crazy.
So
Okay.
that was a 5 months of dating
Uh-huh.
via phone from three different countries,
Mhm.
and we would still speak in codes. So those 5 months for Mamta and I, especially for her, was like doing spying.
Yeah.
We were underground churches, as you would have heard from different places. So Pakistan was an underground church. So then she comes back in December after 4 5 months being there. We get engaged, and then following month in January we get married, and on a honeymoon we go to start a church in another Muslim country in Dhaka, Bangladesh, in the middle of civil war. And again, twice a life was caught up. I mean, we could have lost our life. We were caught up in crossfires, and it was ugly. But then it was a blessing in disguise. For 20 days, the civil war was going on. People weren't doing anything. So we had all the time to study Bible with people.
Wow. Okay. So when did you get married? What?
So we got married on January 28th, 1996. So we came to India in May 1995, and we got married on January 28th, 1996. So just few months later, 7 8 months later. So everything was fast tracked for us.
Wow, that's exciting. So you went to Dhaka, one of the most densely populated countries and cities in the world. That's
Yes.
crazy. Okay, what was that like? Can you just you're on your honeymoon, you just got married and you went straight to Dhaka?
Yes.
No, you didn't go to Tahiti or anything like that. You didn't go to Phuket or
So we got a chance to go to actually Bali for the conference.
okay. Maybe
So it was a
maybe I saw
conference.
you there. I was in Japan at the time, so I wonder
Yeah,
if
we used to meet there in Bali conferences. So I take that back. I did go to Goa, which is like Hawaii of India,
okay.
and we went there for 3 4 days. And in that time, I also preached in the church in Goa during my brief honeymoon. Then went back to Lucknow, my hometown, while my dad threw a big reception, calling thousands of people. And after that, we went to Bali, and then we went to start the church there. So everything happened at a breakneck speed.
Right. But at least you had a little bit of fun. Goa, that's the Portuguese area of India.
Yes,
Okay.
it's the Portuguese area, Portuguese settlement. Beautiful, beautiful
Got
place.
to go there sometime. So tell me a little bit about you you fell in love with Mamta. Is it how do you spell her name?
Mamta, Mamta, Mamta.
Mamta.
MTA, and it's pronounced as Mamta.
Mamta. Okay.
And Mamta is a Hindi word for mother's love and affection.
Oh my gosh. Okay. What did your parents think about you getting married? Not, they didn't set you up. They didn't arrange the marriage. Did they freak out? How did they feel about that?
So they did. They were when I first went to India after being in New York for a couple of years. My father set me up with arranged marriages where you have the biodata, the curriculum vitae of a prospective groom. So I'm here. I'm an engineer returned from America. I'm meeting doctors, lawyers, and all these because my dad had arranged. So then I told Dad, I appreciate you doing that for me. But my conviction is I want to get married to a disciple who
Mm,
loves God more than she loved me, because that's what the conviction my parents instilled in me
right.
while growing up.
Right.
That always marry a woman who loves God more than you, then she's going to love you more than anyone else.
Wow. Okay. So, and he took that okay. He accepted it.
And I was so surprised that he took it so well, because lots of my other friends who come to the US get the degrees, their masters, PhD, whatnot. They go to India. Literally, their parents arrange everything, and they had no say in that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's just kind of back out. Let's go up to the 30,000 foot level. Give me a kind of a broad overview of your career, your work since your marriage and up until the present time. Where have you been? And then we'll drill back down in a second on.
Yeah. So good question. So after we got married, we were in the ministry for 8 years, and we were just loving it. We didn't want to come back because we had planted, like Mamta had planted a church in Pakistan, us together in Dhaka. Then we went to our hometown in Lucknow, India, and then we were in North India, raising up so many people. Didn't want to come back to the US. But in 2003, around the same time, Henry Creed's letter came out. There was a tragedy in my wife's family. Her sister lost her 18-year-old son and a 44-year-old husband in a boating accident in Miami. So we flew in all the way from New Delhi to Miami to grieve, and we saw that Mamta's family, they're all Hindus, and they were grieving. And Mamta felt like for 8 years she's been helping convert so many people in South Asia. Her own family needs that help. So with a very heavy heart, we decided to leave the full-time ministry and move back to Greenville, North Carolina, where her sister also moved to Greenville, North Carolina with her son and daughter who survived, that tragedy. So there, once we moved back, I went into consulting in engineering, and I took my professional engineering exam, PE. So I became a consultant. My wife, she was a scientist with Glaxo before the ministry. She became a science educator. And we both decided we've been trained so much in the ministry. Now's the time we'll become tent maker, evangelist, and women's ministry leader. So that's when we started at tent making. In evenings and weekends, we would study Bible with people, and that's how the Raleigh Triangle Church also sent people. They knew that ministry-trained people are there, so we started doing ministry on the side, and then we were there for about 8 years. Now, the good thing that happened was Mamta's parents didn't like her marrying somebody who's a Christian. They didn't even come for a wedding in India. But those 8 years being in Greenville, North Carolina, gave such a good time for Mamta to reconnect and reconcile with her parents, with her family members. And then God sent us to Rochester, New York, with my job. Now, before that, when we started a church in Greenville, North Carolina, our daughters, Megha, Esther, and Manvi Lydia, were 5 and 2 years old. So we started the church in Greenville, North Carolina, just us four. So daughters would just help out in the ministry, whatever they could do. Then 8 years later, when we went to Rochester, New York, we started the same thing. All four of us, they were 11 and 14 years old, so they would help out in song leading, in childcare, and everything. And we started again. I was working as a consultant in energy sector in Rochester, New York, and God blessed us so much. We had people from Canada come over and visit us, and we always make sure we connected with people. So I'm in the energy field since then, and then 5 years ago from Rochester, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where we are part of the Cornerstone Church Fellowship, and we continue doing the same thing. Now, when we were in Rochester, New York, our daughters became disciples. They were 15 years old. They're 3 years apart. And that was such a great birthplace, spiritual birthplace for my daughters to become disciples. And now we are all here. My older daughter is graduating from med school next May, and she's looking for interviewing for residency. And the younger daughter, she's a software consultant. She graduated, both girls graduated from New York. Younger one graduated from Cornell, and older one and younger one graduated from RPI as a computer scientist. She was working in New Hampshire. Now she's here in Atlanta for a month. So this Thanksgiving, we all four of us are together.
Wow.
And we look back at lives that whether we were in full-time ministry when they were little or as tent makers, we, family of four, have always worked together as a family to reach out to people.
That's so cool. Okay, so RPI. What is that?
Oh, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's a technical college
In
school in upstate New York, in Albany, New York.
in Albany. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So your older daughter, she's going to become a doctor.
Yeah.
Older one's a software programmer or a
And the
soft,
younger one is a software engineer. Yeah.
software engineer. Okay. Wow. Okay. Super gifted. So in Greenville, was that were there disciples there in Greenville at the time that you guys moved there, or did you guys just plant the church
Oh, we
there?
started from scratch in both locations, Greenville, North Carolina, as well as Rochester, New York. So we call ourselves as spiritual entrepreneurs. Since we got a lot of experience in starting churches in Pakistan, Bangladesh, my hometown, Lucknow. So we love starting from scratch, raising people up, and just joy to see them risen up. I converted two engineers at my workplace in Rochester. One engineer, he's a leader in New York City church. The other one, we got him married, just like Mamta and I. We arranged his marriage from a sister from Raleigh Church. Now both of them are leading the church in Rochester. A couple of months ago, we were in May, actually, we were in Rochester. I just finished my MBA from University of Rochester, and they are doing such a great job leading the church. So it's a joy to see as working as an engineer and leading the church in Rochester.
Okay. Did you say you just finished your MBA?
I finished my MBA in May. So I was working, it was part-time, so it took me a while. So I continued studying for my MBA. So I just
When you're
finished
in
it
Rochester, not
in
recently.
Rochester. Yeah. But
Okay.
then when I came here, I just finished it online.
Okay. How many degrees do you have?
So I have, I would say, one bachelor's in civil engineering, another master's in environmental, then master's in business administration. And of course, we did the biblical studies also in India, those under Dutch Jacoby. So I just love to read and study and challenge myself to learn and unlearn the wrong things that I learned earlier. So I just love. Of course, I'm also a PE professional engineer, and I have a PMP project management professional certification. So I try to do a lot of things in a short time that God has given me.
That's exciting. Okay. How about your wife? How many degrees does she have?
So she has bachelor's and master's, and she also has that certification in biblical studies.
Wow. Okay. Man, oh man, that is really exciting. So you planted two churches, self-supporting, and now you're in Georgia. What did you join an existing church in Georgia? You mentioned the Cornerstone Church. What?
Yeah. So this is basically there are six churches that came out of the big Atlanta church.
Right.
So Cornerstone Church is one of those six churches. Like we have Northview, North River, Bath, Bridgestone. So we have several churches here so we are part of one of those six churches and our church is about 250 disciples.
Okay. Now, what brought you to Georgia?
My work.
Okay. But you decided at this point, I'm not going to start another church. I'm going to just join another church. Why is that? Why didn't you just keep going? I mean,
we could have gone, and if had there been no church in Atlanta, we would have done the same thing. So we've been kind of very tilling the soil, and we've got a lot of opposition also when we started churches as a small, because in America, churches were always 40, 50, or 80 disciples mission team. So we saw that model in India, and we did it just my wife and I, and even in my hometown with seven of us. So we could have done here also. However, since the church was established and our daughters were grown up, they're adults. So this time it actually helped us to see that we can also be witness to and helped out, especially as we have grown older, our daughters have grown older. So we've been enjoying that time. However, we still help people in their marriage, help people in their, if they want to reach out to people, learn how to evangelize in the modern day, how to connect with people. And lately, we've also started doing what I coin as food evangelism. We, as a family of four, we started on a whole food plant-based diet, aka Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego diet. And we use that model to help people to improve their physical health. And then we help people to heal their spiritual, emotional, and mental health.
Wow. Okay, so does that mean you're a vegetarian?
We are vegan.
You're vegan.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard a
Whole
joke that
food
said,
plant-based.
how can you tell if someone's a vegan? And the answer is they'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. That
Okay.
is exactly right. So, this is basically a niche way that we feel like God has brought us here because we are living in this place where there are a lot of older Christians and in established churches. So, we've helped a family, about 50 plus families, to change their lifestyle and using biblical principles, Daniel chapter 1, where these four young men, for 10 days, they put themselves off to the test for eating a vegan plant-based diet for 10 days. And then they got 3 years of University of Nebuchadnezzar's university to practice that 3 years, and they were pretty good. So now God is using us, these older people, that if they can be healthy physically, like they've gotten rid of their weight or diabetes or blood pressure or different kinds of cancers. Well, if they're healthy physically, they can be healthy mentally, spiritually, and emotionally also.
Wow. Okay, you are a man of many talents, that's for sure. Wow. Okay, so I mean, you're in a target-rich environment. The Southeast is one of the most overweight areas of the U.S., according to
Yes.
what I've heard. The food there is super rich and tasty,
Yeah.
and it's a massive epidemic in the U.S. Just
Yeah.
obesity. So you're exactly where you need to be. You're very slim and trim, that's for sure. Okay, what are you looking forward to? I mean, here you've had this very, very rich background in engineering and your secular pursuits, but at the same time been very effective in the U.S., which is a foreign country to you. You weren't born here.
Mhm.
Planting 2 churches. I mean, that's a lot. What are you looking forward to in the future? Are you going to continue to plant more churches? What does the next 5 years look like to you?
Well, I'm even thinking beyond 5 years.
Okay.
And the reason being is you may have heard of Blue Zone people.
Yes, the TV show about
So
eating well and
they're yeah, they're 100 plus years old. They don't take any medications and they're very healthy, robust. And four things basically they do well. One is the diet, lifestyle, environment, and community.
mm.
Or we can encapsulate that as Acts chapter 2, 42 to 47.
Okay. All right. There we go.
So,
There's the minister in you coming out right there.
so we want to live 100 plus years. I want to beat my namesake's record, 120 years. Bible says his eyes were still very strong. He was very healthy. In fact, he was ready to go and lead the mission team of 2 million plus Jews to the promised land had God not stopped him on his tracks.
Wow.
So, our goal is to remain healthy physically, emotionally, mentally. And now our daughters are all settled. Well, the older one is graduating, then she'll go for a residency for a few years. So we are now, she comes and stays with us on and off, depending on which medical rotation she's going to. So we call ourselves as partially empty nesters, not completely.
Right.
However, our goal is, my wife and I often talk about, is that if God willing, we remain healthy, we will go and travel and help, just like what Paul would do, strengthen churches in different parts of the world. God has blessed us in a rich life, and he's blessed us with a lot of opportunities. We don't want to let that slip by.
Mm.
However, this little time here, 5 years we've been in Atlanta, had been good healing for us, maturing as adults or parents of adult children, and learning and growing and being given to. So just like the biblical Moses, 40 years he spent as a prince of Egypt, 40 years as a nobody in wilderness, and last 40 years leading God's people. So this Moses, I was 8 years in the ministry in South Asia. 8 years I was in Greenville. 8 years I was in Rochester. And now 3 more years are left in Atlanta.
Mm. Wow. Okay.
So God is working with me in 8 years block, because 40 years would be a long chunk.
Wow. Okay. Boy, there's a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to go with all of this. This is, you're kind of like Elon Musk or President Trump, or you don't sleep very much, obviously.
I do. My goal is to sleep at least 8 hours
Okay.
a day. And the reason I do it, ever since I've come back to the US in 2003, I've been following Pete Scazzaro's emotionally healthy discipleship.
Okay. Good. Okay.
And I've been teaching and preaching that also in my kind of role in a big city, to help people to grow emotionally more. A lot of time, people, or even as Pete Scazzaro says, you cannot be spiritually mature without being emotionally and mentally mature.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about these, tent making ministry that you've built. I give a lot of thought to, like, how can we fully saturate the U.S. and other countries around the world. I think that the Philippines is doing a great job of getting small churches going. I think other places, I just interviewed a couple from India that had gone to a neighboring church and just got it going and did a great job. I can't remember. I think it was north of Bangalore, but that was really inspiring. Like, right now in the kingdom, we have like a model of the pillar church, which is you go to a metropolitan area and then you're supposed to evangelize the surrounding areas. That seems to have stalled because the financial model is really untenable. It's difficult to do it the way we've done it, which is send a lot of money and a fully staffed team. And what are your thoughts in terms of just, I kind of want to talk to you about ministry here. How are we going to saturate all the small towns and villages, starting with the U.S., but other countries as well? What are your thoughts there?
Very good question. So my wife and I, that's what we always want to do, is to visit small places and encourage people that you can do it. It was not on our horizon or for Mamta to visit Lahore, Pakistan as a tourist destination place. It was not on my side to go to Dhaka, Bangladesh. If India was a third world country, Bangladesh at that time was like a sixth world.
Right.
But we went there starting from scratch, even Greenville, North Carolina. There were churches started in big cities. They were not focusing on small. Rochester, there wasn't any church. In fact, the upstate churches, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, when we went there, they were struggling because, again, all the focus was in big city. New York City is like humongous, giant. So us being there, we brought a lot of faith in people. We raised up leaders in these small places. And our conviction is that if we want to evangelize America and the world, then small churches is the way to go.
Exactly. I'm 100% with you. Absolutely. Okay. There are small churches out there that are struggling. They're pockets, satellites of disciples, just hurting, not doing well. What advice would you give to those disciples to regain momentum, or to keep growing, or to grow? Maybe they haven't baptized in 5 years. What do they need to do?
I would go back to the advice I received when I started church in Greenville, North Carolina. So in conferences, we would meet, and I asked Frank and Erica Kim, what advice would you give us? You raised up 3 awesome daughters. And so the advice they gave us back then, when we just started, and we had come back from India, being there for 8 years, didn't know the culture as a married couple in America. And what advice they gave us was, make sure, Moses, when you start there, make sure your needs are met as a husband and wife. Make sure you take your little children, 5 and 2 years old, to connect them with other children. So while we were in Greenville, North Carolina, and in Rochester, we simply cannot remember how many miles and miles traveled, how many flights we took to connect us with other people so that we are given to and our children. And as we speak now, Mamta and I, Megha and Manvi, all four of us, we are here. We're going to talk a lot about that in this Thanksgiving, that God has blessed us with relationships in smaller places as well as big places. And particularly small places are important because the idea of self-care is sometimes lacking in people who are zealous for the Lord,
Right.
but they don't take a step back to work on their personal relationship with God, their relationship with their spouses, their relationship with their church, with their children. And then it's like I always told people, hey, my relationship with my God, my wife cannot come in. And after that, our daughters cannot come in my relationship with God and relationship with my wife. And then tell other church members how much I love you, but you guys get the fourth or fifth dibs. And my parents always taught me like that. And guess what? When we started the church in my hometown, my parents became disciples too in Lucknow.
Gosh. Oh,
in the
Lord.
same year, 1996, we planted two churches, first in Bangladesh and second in Lucknow. And now check this out. In Dhaka, we were just two of us with Mark Templar for 1 month. You moved back. We were just Mamta and I. We had nothing else just to trust God and trust each other. Then we moved to Lucknow church, and there was a pastor, Methodist church pastor. He sent out a letter in Lucknow, my hometown. Prophet in your hometown, right?
Right.
A new cult is in town led by Moses and Mamta Singh.
Oh my gosh.
Avoid them like a plague.
Oh boy.
So for me, I had a huge mission team of 7 people. For 1 week, I did not evangelize. I was so fear-stricken that everybody knows about me.
Right.
So some people came to check out who's this radical guy that people in the churches are talking about him. Some came, some studied the Bible, some became disciples. Then I realized that God, thank you for showing me that this pastor whose church I grew up in a Sunday school actually helped me evangelize.
Because they were curious because the letter. They're like, hey, who is this guy?
So that's the advice I give to people is if you are, it's so easy to be disconnected and focus on them because you have to come up. A lot of people want to go to mission team, right?
Right.
My advice to them is, first I ask them, what are you doing in your church before you think of going on a mission team?
Right.
Because it's very challenging.
Right.
And I even tell them it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
However, you can add flavors to your tea and make it palatable and you can drink it, but you've got to work hard where you are. And then once you're there, make sure self-care. Make sure you never, ever lose the priorities. God number 1, if you're married, spouse number 2, children, never, ever compromise that.
Okay. This is really, really inspiring, Moses. What's the most difficult challenge that God has laid in your path? I mean, from talking to you, you make it sound so easy. I mean, planting a church here, planting a church in your hometown, you baptize your parents, you plant a church in Dhaka. I mean, you plant a church in Rochester, you plant a church in Greenville. You're vegan, you eat healthy, you're going to live to 120. Has anything been challenging? I mean, where have you really had to struggle? What's really been difficult in your walk with God and in your life?
Everything was difficult.
Okay.
So if I were to pick one, or I would say that starting a church in Rochester, New York was challenging, despite of the challenges that Mamta faced in Pakistan and Bangladesh. And the reason it was challenging was that people were not letting me plant the church in Rochester, New York.
How do you mean?
Because it was never done to people starting a church in America, even though I've seen it doing it in South Asia and I've personally done it. So I had lots and lots of opposition. there were two evangelists from different churches came and spent time with me, discouraging me not to start the church.
Right.
So when that happened, because the way my dad had raised me up to be a driven person, I just made my forehead a forehead of flint,
Right.
like Ezekiel.
Yeah.
I took that as a challenge. So we started the church in 2011. We went to San Antonio, spent a lot of time with people, trying to drum up a support that we are too, but we are not rogue evangelists or rogue women's ministry leader. We are legitimate people. We have good heart. We are starting a church here. Nobody has there. And then we saw the stats. We saw other churches struggling, like you were mentioning, the smaller churches, and we have a plan. We want to help them. And we did. We actually not only planted a church in Rochester, we helped the churches in Buffalo, in Syracuse, in Albany. We actually planted another church in Binghamton, New York, and we did those regular meeting together, which they still do it. So all that happened because I was not refusing to give up.
Wow. Okay. It's interesting when you say that, because I remember when we planted a church in Ashland, Oregon, back in 2004, that I would get calls from people, and I'd hear from people, and people were talking about us as if we had fallen away.
Yeah.
You know, like we were gone. Like there's almost like they're speaking of us in the past tense. Like, hey, Rob used to be such a great bro. You know, I hate to see my friends fall away. I was like, hey, I'm still alive. I'm still fired up. You know, so I understand that opposition. I think that I see that a lot. I see kind of a herd mentality where people feel like they don't want to step out on faith because they feel like they need to be surrounded by a whole bunch of friends who are exactly their same age, exactly their station of life, and need to be comforted. And it puzzles me because I think about Jesus leaving heaven, just going down by himself, you know, on mission to the world, and starting with such a small group and then sending those guys out, and must have been challenging. But I feel like that entrepreneurial spirit is lacking and needs to be rekindled. I really encourage. I'm inspired by people who are going on Revive EE, and I talked to a guy named Kaladay who wants to go to Japan. Love that spirit. What, you know, to a person who's hesitant about stepping out in faith, anything you'd tell that person?
So if that person is hesitant to step on the faith, but has a good heart and wants to do great things, I would just encourage that person, take it slow. Do those things in where you are and let God build your confidence. Because I love John Mark Comer, two of his books. One is Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. The other one is Practicing the Way. And I listen to his podcast. I just love that guy. Also, I'm biased. He's a vegan like me, and he follows Pete Scazzaro's Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. So we have a lot of commonality. But it's so true what he says. He says that people in America, especially Western societies, people have no idea what Christianity is. And the reason they don't know what Christianity is, because many of us are not practicing what Jesus did.
Okay, let's just start right there. Give me your critique of current Christianity and Christianity in our family of churches. Like, what do you mean by that? Give me your evaluation of what's lacking and what needs to
Okay, let's start
change
with our family of churches.
Okay.
For example, when we had moved here in a big city, a big church, you know, what we notice is the entrepreneurial skills are missing. I'll give you an example. I just went for a walk in the morning with my daughter, who's come here for Thanksgiving. She lives in Atlanta. And I was saying, sweetie, you get disappointed when you go to big churches. I'll give you a latest example, actually. That'll be the best one. So she went to she was in, well, she grew up basically with us, starting churches in Greenville, North Carolina, and in Rochester. And we have taught her all that entrepreneurial skills, right? So she is trying to get into the other church, bigger church there. She's a great singer. She wants to join the worship ministry. She goes there 2 weeks ago for midweek, which was canceled. She didn't know that. Anyway, she still goes there. She said, Dad, nobody was reaching out to her. And she was pretty emotional about it.
Right.
So I had a good chat with her. I said, sweetie, you got to see what you and your sister have learned being on a mission field. You were born in the mission field in South Asia.
Right.
Then you come here, you've been in your elementary, middle school, high school. All you know is how to reach out to people.
Right.
You are excellent communicators. You're very articulate. You're very strong-willed. My older daughter started from scratch ministry in Cornell. And as you know, these Ivy League colleges, they are like far away from God.
Right.
Now, bless her heart, there was another professor, disciple, who was in Cornell. So they both, basically, she was bringing people and they were studying the Bible with people. So I told my younger daughter, you have learned so much. You catch these things and you feel hurt. She said, yeah, Dad, I know I expect a lot. I said, you know what? One good thing all of us are learning now being in a big churches is just when you have a small boat, you can steer it so quickly. Like we did steering of small boat in Greenville, North Carolina, Lahore, Pakistan, Dhaka, Bangladesh, Rochester. But when you have a big, giant cruise ship, it takes a while to move.
Yeah.
So now we're having discussions with her daughter, especially younger one, who's so passionate about studying Bible with people. She sees not only people in the church, but outside also. She went to another friend's Thanksgiving party. There was people, they didn't know. I mean, they didn't reach out to her.
Right.
So you know what I told my daughter? Sweetie, they don't know how to reach out to people.
Right.
Nobody has trained them like you've been trained. Mm-hmm. So in my honest view, that's what is lacking.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. It's right. When you go, you see that when you go to larger churches, part of it is even members of the larger church can't really know every single person. So they stop reaching out and engaging with other people. So it's definitely a concern.
Now, having said that, the way we started our churches and even other movement, they always focused on family group, life group, but even that is eroding.
Right.
The reason churches, if you do the Barna research, you find out that even when they grow in numbers, but they maintain that Acts 2:42 to 45 in the smaller groups, they are the ones who can maintain the vitality of a church.
Right.
But if that starts eroding, like I'm reading this book right now by Sky Jitani, Divine Commodity. He's talking about Vincent Van Gogh and all his life. And it's an amazing book. He's talking about consumer Christianity. Mm. And then in our own church, we did another of his book called With God, which is another great book of Sky Jitani. This guy's father was from India, and he works for Christianity Today, and very insightful writer, you know. So we are noticing that consumer Christianity has creeped in our churches.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. It's impressive to me that you've planted churches bivocationally as a foreigner. You're an immigrant in the States. You have an accent. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the challenges. I mean, like you didn't allow that to be a barrier. Wasn't that challenging as a Indian national, at least initially? I mean, your wife, she's first generation here, but what was that like?
Great question. So I would say yes and no. I would doubt myself. What am I doing? Indian guy with an accent and teaching and preaching to people in North Carolina with a Southern accent. Sometimes they don't follow my accent. And then I try as much as possible. I may put on a British accent. Maybe they'll understand more. Some responded yes, some responded no to it. Then I said, you know what? Forget trying to please people. I mean, it's my accent, it's my lifestyle. If they don't want to follow me or if they reject Christianity because of that, it's on them.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was tough. So when we first moved in 2003 to Greenville, North Carolina, a small city of 60,000 population, well, it's all relatively speaking, right? I was born in Lucknow, my hometown, 2 million population. I went to IIT Delhi, 25 million, came to New York, 8 million. I always lived in big cities. When I first moved, and then being in big cities, churches, you're always surrounded by people. Then I come from being a big shot evangelist in India to a nobody in Greenville, North Carolina. I could
Right.
relate to my namesake Moses, 40 years in wilderness.
Right.
Nobody knows me, you know? And I'm like, where are the people?
Mhm.
There's nobody there. It took me a year and a half to adjust to the living in small cities. And
Right.
that's when, Rob, I fell in love with small cities, great place for your marriage, great place to raise your children.
Right.
And ever since, even when I go abroad, I like to go to small
Mm.
cities because now, and that's when our convictions came that the way to reach out to the masses, small cities, is small church model, like John Porter is doing in Florida and other places, you know,
Right.
that's the way to do it. And
Okay.
I see the both parallel big churches as well as small churches. I'm not taking sides, but you've got to have smaller
Oh, yeah,
churches.
absolutely. I think there's a bias against small churches. I see that when I talk to large church leaders. There's kind of a subtle condescension at times towards the
Mhm.
small church that it's not worth the effort or the time to invest in it. If somehow God just placed you as the saturation czar, as the missionary czar for the U.S., to get a church in every town of at least 50,000 people, what would you do? What would your first three steps be?
Well, we'll do what we've done before, but now with a different mindset, you know. Uh, like whenever we've started churches, we'll start just reaching out to people at work. That's the best place. They see you, they talk to you, and then I share the good, the bad, the ugly. In fact, that's how I reached out to the first conversion in Rochester. He came over. He was an engineer. He saw my plaque of being named as a appointed as an evangelist, and he saw my certificate of biblical studies displayed proudly in my office. And he said, Moses, why are you putting all those things? Are you not afraid of putting all those things in your workplace? Well, that gave me such a great platform. I said, and this guy's incredibly talented guy. So he said, I went for 4 years of missionary school, mission school, or a seminary. I don't put those 4 years in my resume. I said, why not, Evan? He said, because I'm ashamed of that. I said, I proudly put. And then one thing led to another. He became a disciple. Of
Wow.
course, we have to overcome a lot. So reaching out to your neighbors,
Right.
your people, and just sharing the things that you've learned and
Mm.
grown and the mistakes you've made.
Wow. Okay. Well, one final question. What advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life count? It's clear that you are making this life count and living a no regrets life. What would you tell a person who says, "Hey, I really want my life to count for God"?
Well, I would tell that person, hey, you've got one life to live. Live life large and know that God is in charge.
That rhymes.
Yes. Because not only that rhymes, that has been the hallmark of my life.
Mhm.
Yes, we'll go through good, the bad, the ugly. We'll go through disappointments. We'll go through grieving. Well, get all the help. Get all your emotions out. That's why I like that movie Inside Out, part one and part two. I mean, get everything out, get help. Don't be shy. Don't be proud to ask for help. I mean, I have made friends being in all those places, remote areas all over the world. They're still my friends, and I've learned a lot from them.
Mm.
Did all of them become disciples? No. Did they become my good friends? Yes. Do I
Wow.
still keep in touch with them? Yes.
Mm.
Do I keep thinking about the life that I've lived? Yes. Do I have any regrets? Maybe initially, but I dealt with that. Right now, I live life to the full, and I feel like my life has just begun.
Wow.
My I have my life is much ahead of me. So I don't do too much of driving and looking at the rear view mirror. I feel like what all God has given, He's given me much more life ahead to keep building on these
That's
things that
awesome.
I need to learn and relearn and just live for the moment for the Lord.
Moses, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, of course. And again, thank you for what you've been doing all over the world. And I just appreciate you having me in your podcast. And I wish all the best for you, for what you're doing and your family.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First of all, let your friends know about the podcast. Secondly, read and review one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find both of them on Amazon.com. Finally, support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.